oh, you should be engaging with your niche. It's not going to do anything for your account. And yeah, we can go into that later if you want.
Hello and welcome in everybody to today's live interview that we are recording here. Myself, Darby Rollins, joined today by Jenay Rose. And Jenay has a lot of experience in the world of organic marketing, and especially when it comes to Instagram and TikTok. And so today, what we're going to be covering inside of this interview and this conversation is going to be kind of a deep dive into Instagram and what you need to know about what's working right now, what's going on with kind of current trends in the state of the marketplace when it comes to organic social media. We'll have some open floor time here on this call for Q&A for those of us that are tuned in live from our community. And my hope is that through this call and this interview that you walk away with some actionable strategies that you can go and apply into your business, especially if you've been implementing the omni-channel content distribution challenge. There's a lot of content that you're getting out there onto the socials. Now, are you best optimizing yourself with your organic engagement and best practices? And so Jenay is going to be shedding a lot of light there, but a little bit about Jenay as we kick things off, and I'll let you give us more of the details, Jenay, to kind of give you a brief intro here. But Jenay starts from some bold beginnings. Back in 2017, Jenay left a prestigious position at one of the world's largest brands to embark on a journey as a life coach. And starting with just 10,000 followers, she had no idea, or not even thinking about monetizing. She carved a new path for herself from coach to leader, which she is now recognized as the OG and online business coach, guiding service professionals, freelancers, consultants, and experts since 2019 on how to cultivate profitable social media communities. And through this, she's proven her impact and having personally served over 700 clients with more than 10,000 sales on her course and digital products. Jenay's strategies have propelled her and her students in her own business to achieve tens of millions of dollars in revenue through organic social media efforts. And so Jenay, as we mentioned, are specializing her practice on Instagram and TikTok, where she is actively applying her expertise. And you can see her on her Instagram at Jenay Rose Official. Forget about this. The Boss Method. Jenay is well known for her trademarked four-step process, the Boss Method, which is build, offer, sell, and scale. It's become a cornerstone of her coaching and a major factor in her clients' success. Jenay, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here and joining with us. Welcome in.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Darby.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of give us like maybe the elevator pitch version of like that kind of transition from leaving prestigious position to kind of going out on your own and carving your own path. Can you kind of give us a kind of like from your perspective, what does that journey look like to bring you to where you're at now as a successful coach with successful case studies to show here in 2024?
I think that, with the social media highlight reel we see today, it's super easy to think that people just overnight, wake up to millions of dollars in followers. That definitely wasn't the case for me. I'm a super slow burn. So hopefully a lot more people can relate to that. But I would say that really being someone who always wanted to be an entrepreneur, I didn't really fit into that corporate mold. Prior to that position, I was like fired from almost every job I ever had. I just couldn't really fit into what people wanted me to do. Always found a better way, right? My way was a better way. And, in a corporate environment, people don't really like that so much. But I started sharing on Instagram really my journey when I found yoga. And so that led me into life coaching. And, one thing led to another. By the time I quit my corporate job, I had about 10,000 followers. And little by little, kind of brands started reaching out to me. And I realized, okay, that might be one way to monetize. I tried it. I didn't really love it. I'm still very, very minimal on the brand side. But what I did like was really working with people. And because I built that community, a lot of people had naturally started to come to me, DM me, asking me like, hey, like, can you help me with X, Y, and Z? How do I do this? Like, I've been following you for so long. And so really the ability of like giving without the desire to receive in the beginning really helped me forge this brand of like, I've had people who have followed me literally since this all started back in 2017, right? So you can imagine the nurturing that's gone on in that. And I just sort of fell in love with the organic social media business because I didn't know it was a business. I mean, it wasn't really one way back then. Sort of around 2019 is when we started to see like this is a full industry. Now, so many people, I mean, being a course creator or an online coach is really now much more accepted. I mean, it wasn't back then. But It's been a crazy ride, and I'm excited to share some of those insights with you guys.
And you know, a lot of our community does come from the entrepreneur's path, or either a coach or consultant or service provider that's, in our case, often leveraging AI in some way. But when you're getting started and even just like creating content and courses, like 2019, that's kind of like a pre-Chat GPT era.
Oh yeah.
And you know, you had to learn a lot going through as kind of one of the early trailblazers for the social media and online world. Are there any big mistakes that you found were hurdles to your success that, looking back on it now, you would tell a younger Jenay that, like, if you just kind of like took a different approach, maybe in some pivotal moments, then that could help other people that are getting started kind of overcome some of those obstacles before they hit
Yeah,
them?
absolutely. So I'll tell you one thing that I did really well and one thing that I think I could have done a lot better, because I think the kind of listeners and viewers will relate to this. So what I did really well was I always listened to my market, my audience. I didn't ever try to come up with something and pitch it. It was always like I built this community, right? And when we think about social media in today's environment, it is all about that community. And if you build this audience of people who care about, whatever it is that you do, or who are invested in you, if you let them tell you what to create, you're going to be a lot more successful versus trying to like push some product that you haven't validated that they want or need. So I always was just like pivoting and kind of listening to my market and iterating and refining from there. And I think that's really why, like, from 2017 to 2018, I was able to build a six-figure business, and then from 2019 over into 2020 was like our first $1 million year. So it's always like really listening to them. I didn't set out to be a business coach. It happened, right? My audience asked for that from me, and I had the background to be able to provide that. And then one thing I think that was a major mistake was really looking outside of myself and allowing your kind of competition or other people to infiltrate your blinders. So I tell my clients now, I say, keep your blinders on. Like, don't ever look at your own niche. I know that there's a lot of advice online right now about, oh, you should be engaging with your niche. I am the complete opposite. I would never recommend that. It's not going to do anything for your account. And yeah, we can go into that later if you want. But I think that it's really easy to sound just like everyone else, especially when you're paying more attention to what everyone else is doing and talking about in your space. And you're going to be so much better off really focusing on like innovating and using your own perspective and your own unique voice and your own unique, experience that you bring to the table. Because in today's environment, especially, it's not just posting content. Like, it's not just being consistent, right? You're competing with some of the best creators in the world, the best brands in the world, right? The most innovative people in the world. You have to have a unique voice. You have to be able to leverage whatever it is that you do with your own twist, or, emphasize your personality, right? A lot of these things matter in 2024 because, earlier on in the industry of social, I would tell you it was all about information and value. Today it's all about personality on top of that information and
Yeah,
value.
the personality theme seems to be coming up more and more with who are people actually connecting with online, and where are they getting their information, and who are they building trust with in a world where like there's more and more noise by the day, especially with AI and these echo chambers, if you will, easy to get lost in if you do get stuck in your niche. And so I'm curious if you can elaborate a little bit more about where you're going. Let's use Instagram as the platform for doing this listening, connecting with folks that are outside of, let's say, your niche, to carve your own path and connect with those without getting kind of like sounding like everybody else that may just be focused on their little bubble.
Yeah, so I would say, like, if you're looking for any type of inspiration, it's great to take it from other industries. I would call it being next to your niche or niche. Where, for example, I'm a business coach. I'm not looking at other business creators' content, right? Where I might go for inspiration is fitness, right? Or life or therapy, or right, something that I think I can pull inspiration from. Um, and apply that to my own space, rather than what a lot of people do, the echo chamber that you just mentioned, is they go and look at what are my competitors doing, what are the other creators in my space doing, the similar types of businesses, and then that's really when you end up sounding just like everybody else. So when it comes to bringing your own personality onto it, right, I know a lot of, your guys' whole idea is like, how can you leverage AI and GPT and all these things to make your workflow easier and simpler? I would say that that's possible, right? I think it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. But when it comes down to that filtration of what are you actually producing at the end of the day, that messaging is so important. And so one thing that the first thing we always have our students do is market research, right? And this isn't going out and asking, the websites. Like, this is actually going and having conversations and interviewing your ideal customer. And this applies to any type of business. I mean, we've worked with, Pilates studios that have 25 locations in Australia, all the way to like your local, business down the street. And then of course your coaches and consultants. So really understand, like, who is your target follower, which should be your target customer. Because my perspective is always going to be, if you're trying to monetize this, you're trying to sell something at a certain point, you have to be generating leads, not followers. And there is a difference. And the difference is that person just following you for free info, for free advice. Are they random? Are they from a follow for follow situation, or a comment pod? All of these like cheap hacks, really not valuable, can really ruin the health of your account. Stay away from them. Instead, focus on your messaging, right? So that messaging comes from the horse's mouth. Like, go to your end customer. I mean, we have like a 30 question, customizable template almost, but like a questionnaire essentially of like getting the right information from those people and then following that as closely as possible. So for example, one great easy hook would be a quote from your ideal customer and applying that to a trend, right? So what this creates is resonance, where like, first of all, the platform knows who it's for because it's using these specific situations and specific keywords that only your ideal customer is going to be able to relate to, right? That's how specific we have to be on these platforms. Trying to talk to everybody is like trying to talk to nobody. And I know you guys have probably heard that before. So if you're rolling your eyes, unroll them, because I promise you it matters. You don't want to be opening up this filtration to try and talk to everybody, because the platform itself, algorithm, isn't going to know who to put your content in front of. And then on the flip side, let's say by happenstance that piece of content does get in front of an ideal customer. If they don't resonate with that, if they don't relate to it, if they're not thinking, holy shit, it's me, or oh my God, how did Darby know? Right? It's like he's inside my brain. They're just going to keep scrolling, right? There's no instinct or need to respond, to reciprocate, right? So it's really, really important now more than ever when we talk about personality, matching that with the messaging that like your ideal client is already kind of narrating in their head.
Yeah, I think like the story we're telling ourselves on a day-to-day basis is where it seems like you want to find that intersection of where you can help as the guide, right? In their story, and kind of like the classic story brand framework, and coming in and helping the hero of the journey along that path to solving their problem. And with that comes to mind, like, what are people thinking about on a daily basis? Well, it's either like stuff that they want, or it's their like problems and stuff that they want to get rid of having. Anything that you're looking for, particularly when it comes to hashtags
Mhm.
and quotations, or things when you're having these conversations that are like the 80/20 of narrowing down on finding the right messaging for the right audience, because it can be so hard to even narrow down, this is my perfect person. It kind of be scary too if you haven't really found that niche yet. Any good approaches that you found to help with kind of honing that
For
focus?
sure. So I think on the messaging side, and then we can kind of go into the mechanisms, because which would be like a hashtag, right?
Hmm.
So the way that I look at social media and the way that our philosophy, what we teach is there's two elements. And when you bring those two pieces together, you have the right formula. So there's messaging and there's mechanisms, right? So the mechanisms are all the things you hear, like the hook, the caption, the call to action, the geotag, the hashtag, all that stuff, right? Those are all, they can help, but they're not it's like lipstick on a pig, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you've got all the right mechanisms but your messaging is garbage, not going to help, right? But when that messaging is really locked in, this is why we see posts that go really viral that don't even use hashtags, right? That don't use or follow any of the mechanisms. So it's like mechanics and the messaging, right? So just thinking about those two worlds, and then we bring them together, and you're going to have a pretty good formula. So when it comes to, let's say you're really new on this journey, you maybe aren't clear on who your niche is or your customer, one thing I would advise is like, what problems have you solved for yourself, right? So if you, let's say you don't have, it's not clear to you what your expertise is or what your knowledge is or what
Hmm.
your skill is, we're all good at something, or something that you're really obsessed with, right? Like, you're more knowledgeable about something than someone else. So that's like a good place to start looking for that. And then we're always solving problems, right? Like as a business owner, literally the only reason you're in business is solving some type of problem. So thinking about that from your life, what have you solved, and kind of using that to guide that end customer, because we're always our first client. Like, right? I didn't go to someone and learn how to build this thing, right? Along the way, sure, but I had already gotten to a certain point. And so I'm sure everyone has that thing. And sometimes you need someone else to pull it out of you, right? Which is where it can be nice to have the conversation like this. Oh, well, maybe it's X, Y, and Z. But yeah, the figuring out like what conversations are going on in their head, what are they thinking about, what fears do they have, what are their goals, what are the things that they've tried, and why haven't those things worked? And so using that to kind of build from your messaging and your ideal customer. And we call it an ICA, an ideal client avatar, right? So you're kind of build this person, give them a name, yes, demographics, depending on what business you're in. I would say if you're a consultant or a coach, it's probably more in the psychographic area. So it's more like what makes them tick, what keeps them up at night, right? What is that aspiration that they're grinding and going towards, and the thing that if they don't get it, life falls apart. And the timeline and all, there's so many factors that go into that. But really, when you understand that person from that level, messaging is going to be a lot easier to come up with. I always say the worst place to look for content ideas is in here. Think, oh, I'm sitting down. Okay, I'm gonna write 5 hooks, and it's like you're looking at the Google Doc, and it's just the like blinking, cursor. It's the worst. So what we always recommend is like having that market research up, hold up in front of you, and then you start pulling content ideas out of that, and then you can kind of move more into the like mechanism, which is okay. Do I have a concept for this? What is the idea behind it? What's my goal? Right? Every piece of content should have a goal, whether it's reintroducing yourself or a client case study, right? Or handling an objection, or the 3 things you wish you knew sooner about X, Y, and Z. Because there's really 3 categories of content, and every piece of content falls under these 3 categories. So you've got your educational content, right? You've got your promotional content. So education is all the value, the 3 tips, 3 ways, 3 reasons why, etc. Right? Then you've got your promotional content. And I would say like a good rule of thumb is split it 33% across the board. 33% educational, 33% promotional, which is your client case studies or your customer testimonials, any promotions or sales that you're doing, like Black Friday, right? Or your 1-year anniversary or whatever that thing is. Or if you're a coach consultant, maybe you're launching, right? You're enrolling 5 clients, that sort of thing, where you're actually giving a direct offer, telling people what you do, how they can work with you, etc. And then you've got your relational, right? Which is your connection-based content. Super important. This is where you're sharing your opinion, you're busting myths about the industry, things you agree with, don't agree with, mistakes you made, right? The questions you're asking me, like this type of sharing that hero journey, if you will, so that people can actually connect with you, because nobody wants to follow a brand, right? People want to follow a character or a person or someone that inspires them or, entertains them, if you will. So those are kind of your 3 categories.
And it's interesting you say nobody wants to follow a brand, but there's some brands that people follow, but the brands that people follow tend to have personalities behind them that people are resonating with.
100%. Duolingo, perfect example. If you guys aren't following Duolingo on TikTok, pull it up right now and go check it out. Like there's such a prime example. Same thing. It's almost like I'm gonna forget the name of that brand. What are those little tiny cameras that you put on like your helmet? Your GoPro. Yes, yeah. Your GoPro. Right. So their content is really experiential. Like you're watching someone jump out of a plane and you're getting their POV, right? Super experiential. So it's like really driven towards that risk taker, right? That person that gets the high of jumping out of the plane. So they all have personality in some way. Like you said, it's not some boring, like here's a flat lay of our product. Like that stuff doesn't work anymore. And we have to really embrace the new game of 2024 of social, which is not a flat lay. It's like, using the product and showing people using that product and showing me how it's made, right? And like, what are the things that make it different? Yeah, I can definitely think of some other brands if we want to go into some like case study ideas, but like right now, social media is making a lot of brands, right? Like Poppy came from organic social, right? It was the owner talking about her gut issues, and then she developed and formulated this thing because she loved soda, but it was all garbage. And now, right, they're valued at, whatever $100 million it's going to be. And I'm sure someone's going to, acquire them soon. So, I mean, brands are literally coming from social media for the first time ever, but they're not acting like a brand, right? TikTok says the worst ads or the best ads are TikToks. So you make
Mhm.
it as an organic piece of content first, you make it as a TikTok first, right? And if it performs well, guess what? Now you've got momentum and put your ad spend behind that. Versus the old ad kind of like journey, I guess you could say, was people would test, 15 creatives and all of these different buttons and all of these different things against each other, then find two winners, test those against each other, then keep going. But you're spending money all along the way, right?
Mhm.
I don't know a ton of brands who have that type of pockets, those deep pockets anymore. So thinking about prove it organically and you're gonna more than likely it'll perform with ad spend behind
Yeah,
it.
I think that's a great point, especially when you're looking from a marketing perspective of this is super direct response. We've got X amount of ad budget, and we're gonna just split test the crap out of every ad here and use AI for all the things. And woof, like that's its own project in itself. And like you said, it costs money and you can test things very fast that way. But then on the flip side, you see brands getting really creative with how they're even starting. They're doing the listening, the hashtag research, the trend identification, talking to the market, and then they're validating it first organically and then putting the money behind what's actually working on that front. And yeah, I've seen it, you probably on, TikTok or Instagram these days, like these brands are just coming up and they all seem to have a different life to them. And like the theme of some of these brand pages is in some cases like really captivating, or it's just really that person or that kind of vibe. And this is where I think we might see maybe more noise on the personal creator front, but I'm curious your take from a theme perspective. I've heard you talk about the word theme in a different way that I think the traditional person's like, oh, this is a cool colors on my page and it looks super pretty, but it's maybe not the same like type of theme that you'd want behind a page is actually going to drive business results. So from a brand perspective, can you talk to me a little bit more about what a theme means to you when it comes to building that organic social presence?
Sure. So I think the words that I know where you're going with this. The words I would use is aesthetic because a lot of
Okay.
people think like, oh, my Instagram needs to be aesthetic. So that's the word a lot of people, you guys might know it as a theme, maybe aesthetic. So in that wheelhouse. So I hear that a ton of like, oh, my feed needs to be aesthetic. No, your brand needs to be cohesive, right? So cohesive. So let me explain what aesthetic is. So that's when you go to an Instagram account, and I'm sure a lot of the like social media free tip people do this, where every post has almost like the same cover photo, right? And you land on that profile and it's just like the most like stiff, stale, visuals across the board. I don't know who you are. Like it's hard for me to get a read on that. And you look just like every other person who's, bombing their entire profile feed with cover photos. So instead of that aesthetic approach where everything needs to be uniform and beautiful, right? You want to really focus on making your brand cohesive, where you have brand recognition, right? So when someone sees a piece of your content, how can they immediately know it's you? And this does not mean superimposing a logo on your videos. The platform hates that. Don't do it. But right, maybe you have a certain style. Maybe there is a specific hat that you wear. Maybe there's a specific font that you're using or colorways. But allowing when someone comes to your feed, especially that profile, right? Piece of content they'll see for you page or explore page or on someone else's account that has, shared it to their stories, whatever that use case is, they're going to see that piece of content. That then drives enough inquiry where they click your username and they land on your profile. Now is the potential where within 3 to 5 seconds, usually they're going to click follow or they're going to go back and not see you again, more than likely. So the way that we want to capture that follow is that it's really clear off the bat who you are, what you do, what they're going to gain from this account, right? My perspective on this would be that you want people to see and it needs to feel real. It needs to feel like a real person rather than some like Canva, copy and paste. Because again, like that stuff really worked in 2019. And a lot of the people you see still doing that are kind of from that era and they haven't really figured out how to like pivot. Um, but yeah, cohesion is going to be, it should look, professional, but still approachable, right? It shouldn't feel stale or stiff, or where someone's like, oh, I don't know what this is or who this is or why I should be here, so I'm out, right? So that's that kind of split second view of like the theme of your page. It should be cohesive, right? You shouldn't be using different, for example, Canva graphics every time, right? Like create a template, use that same template, and disperse that accordingly. But like if you guys want to see an example of cohesive, obviously that's like my kind of lifeblood. So you guys can go to my Instagram and check that out. And we can even talk through it. But I use like really bright colors, bold font, but it's the same, but I don't cover every post with it. So you still understand like who I am the second you land on that profile.
Mhm.
Um, and then I have like two that I kind of alternate between. Some of my posts I leave raw. I don't use cover photos for everything. But yeah, just from the profile side, that's where I would recommend don't focus on aesthetics, right? Focus on like the experience someone is going to have when they land on that page, and making sure it's very clear like who you are and you come through in that
Yeah,
way.
that's a great point, especially for that split second like decision that everyone has, right? Like even like the first 3 seconds of videos, and you're talking about hooks. Like if someone doesn't know that they're in the right place or what like they're gonna get or get drawn in, then like on to the next type of deal. And a lot of this is going to come from understanding your audience, who you're trying to attract. I don't know if you're open to sharing kind of a breakdown of your profile
Mhm.
here. I'm sure that would be interesting for some folks to kind of see how are you looking and analyzing your own profile for how it's set up, just for like kind of like a baseline for where people could look at taking inspiration from where to start.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want me to share my screen? Want me to like pull it up
Let's
and
do,
like walk
yeah,
through it?
yeah, let's do it.
Do that real quick. I always find with social media, like conceptually, it's kind of hard to follow. So
Hmm.
having that more like tutorial style, I think is a little bit easier for people. So let me just share this really quick. See my screen. Okay,
Yep.
so clicking onto the profile, right? This is profile view. There are some differences in desktop and app, right? So the app on your phone is going to operate slightly differently. So just grain of salt here. But first, initial things that you want to focus on when setting up the profile properly so that you are driving those correct people to follow you. Again, they see the content first. No one's just going to magically land on your profile. So the content is what brings them to the profile. So just thinking about that kind of funnel, because social media is a funnel, right? Okay, so I've got a clean cover photo, super easy to make on Canva. You can just magic remove. I took a random selfie. Okay. I personally am a fan having your name or your brand name as your username. If you are a consultant, a coach, a freelancer, something kind of in that arena, a personal brand, you're going to have a longer lifeline if you just use your name, more than likely, because sometimes brands can change. Okay, and then we've got our name field. So this, your name field, which is where it says my name, and then these keywords, right? So your username and your name field are two of the most searchable properties of the bio, right? So if I open up, and when I say searchable, I mean literally they are searching, right? So if someone types in, social media, anyone who has social media in their username and or in the name field, right? You can see right here, and these are people that I've seen before, which is why they're kind of top of list. But if you haven't searched for this before, it's a good exercise because you can also do that for your niche. Like this is something that I would consider to do if you are, you know, whatever type of business you have, you want to understand, okay, where am I ranking here so that I do have keywords that are pulling me forward. So when you hear things like SEO on Instagram and TikTok, it literally is this simple. It's search. It's keywords that someone is typing in to the search bar, right? So this name field, super important. You do not need your name in this first half if your name is your username, unless you're meta verified and then they require it. But keywords, right? And I would always suggest having like, what is the information or the value that someone's going to get from this, versus a lot of people will take this opportunity to say like certified XYZ coach, right? But that's not keyword driven. That's expertise driven. So thinking about this from the searchable aspect is why I have this information here. Okay, then you have I would say three good lines in your bio. Four is going to fall underneath a, it says like click here or read more when you're on mobile, right? So you have to unfurl that. So I would always suggest when you're thinking about these changes, obviously do it on your phone, because you're going to be able to then see when you're on that Instagram pulled up, right? You're going to be able to see like when you have it pulled up, where do I fall? Okay. And then grab your partner's phone or a friend's phone and you look at it from their perspective as well to make sure that you see how it says more. It's really tiny right there. You have to click that to unfurl for it to expand, right? So you want to make sure that all of the important information is above that fold, which typically you can get like 3 small lines in. Okay. Who are you? Who do you help? Very simple bio statement. I help blank ideal client to overcome this obstacle. Just fill in the blank. I help blank to blank. Okay. Second line, I typically would recommend something results driven as a question. It's like my favorite way to do it. Ready to get this result? Question mark. And then third line, call to action. DM me heart emoji for help. DM me heart emoji for more. Unless you are specifically in some type of launch, I wouldn't really drive people to your link. Again, it really depends on like what type of business you have. So take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. Depends on like how your business works and what is your goal. But if you are a consultant, freelancer, someone who wants to have those conversations and really qualify before spending time on a sales call, for example, I would absolutely suggest having people DM you first and foremost. It's going to open up that conversation, give you that opportunity to pre-qualify before inviting someone to that next step. But again, that really just depends on like, you know, what type of business you have and what your goals are. Then, so we've got I help statement, result statement, call to action, the third line. And then underneath that, the fourth line would be credibility. Okay. So we always want our call to action above the fold because most people aren't going to click right where it says more. Most people aren't going to click that. They're not going to see it. It's right. You have 3 to 6 seconds at the most. So we want to give the most opportunity because even if they don't follow me, if they're in my DMs, guess what? The algorithm is looking at us like a match and my content is going to get in front of them so much more frequently that more than likely they will follow. So it's like getting that first kind of connection point of that DM is super high up on Instagram's priority list. So if they don't follow you, it's okay because they've DM'd you, right? Again, this should be so clear that not only does it make your ideal client or your ideal follower follow, but it repels anyone who isn't that. Because you don't want 100,000 followers and no buyers, right? Like does nothing for you to have that vanity, unless that's just, you know, you want to be an influencer, right? That's one way to do it. And then link in bio, I would really suggest no more than 2. Instagram now on mobile, if you have Meta verified, you can add images, but you can also play around with like emojis, things like that. Highlights, keep them up to date. Focus on your product. So here are the highlights I would recommend just on like a general perspective. You should have about me, right? Or start here if you want to call it that. And that's your story. Who are you, right? What obstacle did you overcome and what do you do now? Okay. 10 slides at the most. After that, you should have like a work with me or my program, my method, my product, right? Tell us about the product with a call to action in there. Then you should have client wins or testimonials. It's going to be super important. And then anything else that you feel like is important, you could have like a Q&A, which is really, I always add like my stories in here. So I do a lot of like Q&A with my audience to open up that 2-way conversation. So, and it's also really great market research, right? So, I mean, this is like kind of crazy. There's probably 100 in here, but you can see that if someone just starts to kind of tap through here, they're going to get a lot of value really fast. More than likely now I've earned that follow from them, right? So it's kind of having your like bingeable content. And you can almost think about highlights as like a sales page. Like each is like a mini website, if you want to think about it that way. I would say I probably have too many. I mean, these are all just client wins, which is probably pretty egregious. But again, I've got my products, I've got free tips, client wins, and then like anything else that you think is important. And then pin posts is really the only other thing that I would highlight here. You get 3 pin posts on your profile. You get also 3 pinned up posts on your Reels tab. Okay, so it doesn't show for the Reels tab on desktop, but you guys can check that out on mobile. here's my about me, right? And then I did this as a carousel in Canva. I literally take people through my story because now they can relate to me in that way, right? They feel like they know me. It's creating that parasocial relationship. Then I've got a testimonial, which I change based on whatever program we're like enrolling for. And then I have a pinned post here for whatever program I'm enrolling for, right? So these pinned posts can change based on your business. And then don't worry about like engagement on those pin posts. It's really more for that like bingeability of someone is going to be able to kind of land here and understand like who I am and what I do. And I'm seeding the program name. So like it's to me, it does not matter what engagement those have. It's really more about like the overall idea here.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like the snapshot of like this is what you're gonna get with my content. Here's who I am, what I do. Here's how you can work with me or learn more with the call to action. I love
Yeah.
opening up that DM, kind of like starting the conversation, because then
Yes.
that is, at least giving you the ability to start to respond back and get to learn where someone is at if they are going to be a good fit. And like you said, pre-qualifying them to move on to whatever the next step of your process is. But then once you get past these highlights and you get past the pins, then
Mhm.
it's like if they're not sold to work with you at this point, or not work with you, but just like follow you at some
Yep.
point, they can binge as much as they want. Then they can go back and follow. I imagine that if Instagram sees that someone's on your profile for 10 minutes because they're obviously scrolling and consuming content,
Yep.
that you're more likely to show up again on their feed because they're showing an interest in your platform.
Yeah, I mean, the way the algorithm works is like people love algorithms, plural. There are various algorithms, but your explore page, if you will, the way that it works is really like the app is trying to keep you on as long as possible, right? So its end goal is to feed you content, put content in front of you that it thinks you're going to like. And the way that it comes to that conclusion, when I say like, it's not tap the heart, it's actually you're going to enjoy, right?
Mhm.
So the way that it comes up with that information, and it's always testing and refining because it is, algorithm, it is so much smarter than any of us. It's actually looking at your past moves on the platform. So what have you engaged with prior? Who are you following? What are you clicking into? How much time are you spending there? Right? So how much of someone's reel did you watch? Even if you didn't follow them, if you watch, half of that reel, oh man, like that platform is like, oh, okay, you like this. I'm going to put more of that in front of you. Right? So if you guys ever noticed, like when you I think I typed in, or I was looking at something on Explore page yesterday, and then literally my entire Explore page for the rest of the day was tips around hair. It's like hair tips or something like that, right?
Mhm.
So you guys can start to watch and follow that pattern of what are you clicking into, and start to notice, oh, does my feed have a lot more content that's really similar to that? Because that's what the algorithm is doing, right? I mean, it's that slot machine effect. It's like the longer it can keep someone on and engaging, the better for the app. So we have to play to that and appease the app and give it what it wants. So again, it's not just posting consistently. It's like you have to post the right type of content with the right messaging and get it in front of the right people. And so that's why I think people assume social media is really easy, right? Or they just want to delegate it. It has to be something that like I would never suggest delegating your content until you understand what content performs and converts, because a social media manager's job is literally only to post the content for you. They're not coming up with it. And if you're letting them come up with it, my assumption would be it's not really performing for you.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? And I'm going to
Yeah.
pause sharing your screen.
Oh yeah, sure.
For setting up certain types of teams or systems or operations around keeping consistent with this, because
Yeah.
I'm sure a number of people can relate to feeling like social media can almost be a black hole, or it's just a time suck when you get on there. And especially in the early stages of growing an account, you might not see the kind of growth that is giving you that feedback loop. You talk a little bit about how um, maybe you'd recommend somebody even put together a posting, like a calendar for how consistent they're going to be approaching it. How much time would you recommend a business owner that's going to take this as a serious channel
Mhm.
dedicate at minimum on a weekly basis to working with this, and maybe some just kind of like best practices that you see for getting and maintaining that consistent momentum?
Yeah. Okay. So best practices, I would say like post for the audience you want, not the audience you have. So it's like even if you're not seeing that immediate engagement, and you won't because you're building trust with the platform first, right? So you've started a brand new account. The platform, they love that. I mean, they want to promote you. you just have to be very specific with that messaging, right? Of like, who is my content for? And the platform is, its job is to help that content get in front of them. So a lot of times we'll see creators that do have new accounts, they can grow really quickly when they have kind of that strategy in place. But what I would say is remembering like it's, maybe work in 30-day sprints, but know that like it can be a long process. I mean, it wasn't, yeah, like I've grown consistently year over year. And there were definitely a year or two in there when I pivoted my business that I lost followers constantly. But I was posting for the community I wanted, maybe not the community I had at that time. So it's like really seeing that bigger picture of like social media can drive your entire business, right? Like we've generated over $5 million just personally in my business organically, literally from Instagram. Okay. Like I had 30,000 followers on TikTok and then I deleted it to start over. So I would say primarily 99% of that was Instagram. So like it's a massive tool for your business. So it should be given the same amount of like respect and time and energy and learning and strategy as you would give anything else. Because at the end of the day, if your business doesn't have leads, you're not gonna be in business very long. Right. So really looking at it as a value add for your company. Um, I would say for someone who's new, like give yourself a timeline. If you're like, I want to try and learn this on my own, I feel like I can do this, awesome, amazing, go for it. Some people are natural, they can just kind of pick it up. So if that is the case, I would give yourself 90 days. And if you don't reach whatever goal you have, again, I wouldn't make it a follower count, but I would make it like, do I have, 100 leads by the end of those 90 days? If the answer is no, then go get a strategy and work with someone who can actually help you through that process, because there's just so many freaking variables that's why it feels like a black hole, right? Because you're
Mhm.
trying to discover and turn over all of these rocks and make sense of things and play against the algorithm and consistency and running your business and all these other things. And also like drinking water and eating food and like being a person, right? That it can be super overwhelming. So that's kind of my, in a box spiel. But what I would say so far on the strategy side of like, how do you be consistent? Batching is your best friend. So like you should be taking couple hours a week if you can do that. And I mean, that's the time you're going to film, right? So having your trends pulled, like when I'm thinking about, okay, I'm creating my content for the week or the next 2 weeks, I'm going into that super prepared so that I optimize my time. The worst thing you can do is take your brain out of flow and start scrolling to find the things and then film it and then write the caption and then save it in your drafts and then do that again and again and again. Right. So instead, what I do is I will film, I will batch all my ideas, my bullet points, whatever it is, right? I'll spend then, time getting all of my trends for that week, right? And I'll put those things into a Notion, database, for example. And then I'm going to do all of my filming in one sitting. Then I'm going to do all of my captions in one sitting, right? Then I'm going to spread that out. I usually do about like, I would say 10 to 14 days. I've got like pretty locked in, give or take. You do have to be nimble with social. Like if there's something you see, it's a great trend, you're inspired, you just got to jump on it. Totally fine. Because it's not all cut and dry, right? Like that is kind of, again, very dependent on your business and your goals with social media. But from like a solopreneur perspective, like someone who wants you to really use this to grow their business, not just to have a brand presence,
Mhm.
which is like a totally different thing, right? Like we have a client who's a plastic surgeon. He's not necessarily like dying for leads, right? He's like a prime plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. So like it's really just more about having the brand presence and positioning himself as this amazing expert. So, right. And then for that, it's like you can delegate that as far as the posting and the strategy and all of that, because we're then essentially batch creating for him, coming up with the set list and filming all of that and then editing it in post. Right. So like if you guys look at my content right now, you'll see a lot of that. And that was strategic. Like I had to essentially rebuild a whole strategy. So figuring out like what's going to optimize your time. What type of creator are you? Like, are you better at talking? Are you better on the cuff, on the fly? Are you someone who really needs to have every little detail mapped out? Are you a better writer? Right. Because then, carousels might be a better option for you, because you can batch those and then you have some reels here and there versus if you're great, you're vivacious, you like to be on camera, like you want, you know, people to see you and know you, then reels are probably going to be a better priority for you. I read something yesterday that said like 50% of the time spent on Instagram is in reels currently. So like it is a massive driver for the platform. But yeah, consistency is really all about batching. So like coming prepared, knowing what you're creating and setting aside that time block for you to do that. And then, Instagram has a scheduler in the app currently, but there are limitations, right? I mean, there's all these other platforms as well where you can schedule content. Really difficult for Reels, almost impossible because you can't attach any trending audios to that.
Mm.
There's just whatever that limitation is, I don't know. But like you can schedule content, but if there's something that has to have a trending audio attached to it, set the reminder and post it like, yourself. There's not really a way around that. Or you can create the content yourself and then just delegate the posting of it. Yeah, I would say as far as consistency, if you're looking for like a number, TikTok, it's minimum 3 times a day. You have to be posting 3 times a day to really get enough data out there. And it's kind of like quantity is going to lead to quality if you're really paying attention and you have that approach in the back of your mind.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to test different things. Like you're going to have to kind of do that and really figure out some of those elements. Um, and then Instagram, I would say minimum you can get away with is like 3 to 4 times a week. And again, it depends on the goal. If it's just brand presence, yeah, sure, 3 times a week. If it's, I want to build a community, I want this to be the lead, the lead generator for my business, I post 7 to 10 times a week in that kind of area.
Yeah, I think the consistency and like the posting schedule, like you say, might vary depending on your brand, your goals, and like how often are you trying to like really be on this platform and growing that community. The important distinction I see here is like, cool, vanity metric is followers, if that's not leading back to like bottom line stuff in your business. So, like, what is that KPI, that the key, like the performance indicator of leads coming in, let's say it's 100 a month, are
Mhm.
you using any sort of like automation or follow-up approach in your business to help with managing, let's say, a huge influx of leads, or that you're using or that your team is? Like, is there any sort of like basic flow that anyone that is opening this conversation should be aware
Yeah,
of?
so really the only Meta approved partner that I'm aware of, I mean, Instagram itself has autoresponder in DMs. So you can set up, I think it's called questions or something like that in your settings, and you can actually set up in DMs, I believe 4 questions that when someone goes to message you as a new follower, it'll give them 4 options and they can click one and then it opens up that conversation for you. So like that's a good tool inside of Instagram that you can use. TikTok DMs, they really still haven't figured it out. So there's not a whole lot there. There's no automation, there's no plugin or anything like that. Um, and as far as the Meta approved partner I'm aware of is ManyChat.
Yep.
Right. So it's so interesting because I have students who it just is a lifesaver for and it works incredibly well. And then older accounts like myself, I've seen it work sometimes and then I've seen it absolutely destroy the visibility of some of my posts. So I go kind of back and forth on it. I mean, when you have an older account, there's just a lot more like quirks, right? Every account's a little different. It's kind of like people, like everybody's a little bit different, even if you're a twin, right? So yeah, you just have to kind of be cautious and test it and make sure that it works for you. And then, you can use that in your kind of workflow. I think people are starting to become more aware of like what it is and that it's not necessarily you responding. I do think it can be a turnoff. Like we've tested, larger flows in DMs and we always end it with talk to a person, like talk to a real person or chat with a real person to give people that out. And I've also seen it work beautifully for brands like Ticket Rescue. If you guys aren't familiar with them, I was like selling concert tickets recently and someone messaged me and told me about them. And I didn't even realize it was ManyChat because it was in Facebook. So go and you guys can play around with that kind of on the consumer end. Um, but they essentially, single questions, getting all my information, and then they sent me a quote. Pretty cool, right? So that can definitely work for some types of businesses where you can automate that whole process because response time matters. And then, the other thing is that engagement in your posts, right? Like if you're commenting a specific word, I'll do this for example, say, comment boss, and we'll send you a link to do blank, right? Or comment training, and I'll send you X, Y, and Z, right?
Mhm.
So when ManyChat is workable for you in your account, I would say use it earlier than later because it will train, anything that's a plugin I always am wary of because Meta is such a freak. Like they're just weird with that type,
Mhm.
they're just weird with this type of stuff. Because I've had ManyChat get like taken out of my,
Yep.
disconnected. Like there's just a lot of weird, funky things. So always keep your eyes on what's happening, but it's great for engagement and content. If you guys ever see like Amazon influencers, I mean, they're always using ManyChat, right? It's like comment list and I'll send you these 3
Mhm.
shirts from this review. So it's definitely a valuable tool. Just make sure that it works for you and you're using it strategically. But yeah, I would say it probably wouldn't work to like heavily qualify. I mean, I think you could get away with a few questions, but yeah, just depending on like what's the best use of your time, right? If you're a new
Yep.
business owner, like be in there, be present because you're going
Mhm.
to get a lot of market research out of those DM conversations, right? When you're replying to someone's comment and then you go and message them, which a bot can't do, like those complex actions of like, let me know what you need in the comments. And someone says, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, right? If I have an automated responder up on that, it might be completely like opposite of what they said and feel super weird. And I've probably lost that trust with that person.
Mhm.
So, again, like if you're selling products, you can probably use things like ManyChat, but if you're a customer to customer business, it might be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think like you see like the some of the horror stories of these brands that are throwing up Facebook response bots and it's responding to like all the worst questions and it's so like disingenuous and you're just like, like well, I missed having the humans actually in the
Yeah.
comments
So it's
the
me,
comment
it's worth the
section.
extra time. It really is. It's worth the extra time because if everyone else in your space is using those comment auto replies and you're not, right? Like that again is just a way to kind of stand out. And then again, I would say in the beginning of your business, like it's super valuable information that you want to capture. Because if someone asks that question in a comment or they say, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z, guess what I would do? I would reply to that with a video, reel, or TikTok,
Mhm.
right? And now I've opened up this conversation and it's kind of that gift of going second. Someone else sees it and now they're going to ask a question or now they're going to open up to you, right? And that they comment, guess what? That's an invitation to you. You can go and DM them. And then we have like full DM frameworks, but they are like personal. Yeah, we don't do like a whole ton of the automation thing, but I do think, someone like yourself and
Well,
people who
I mean,
really,
there's a time and a place for it. And so it's
yeah,
just like it's not everything shouldn't always be automated all the time,
right.
especially right at the beginning, right? You need to get these people in, you need to know who that
Yes.
target is, right? The messaging as we go back to the beginning, your ideal, customer or client avatar. And then right, that feedback loop where you're listening in, you're taking the questions and you use those questions to create more content, engage in the conversation and be social on social media and build that community and build that audience around your platform. Super valuable insights, Jenay. Thank you so much for breaking this down and sharing the wealth of knowledge that you have on this subject. As we wrap things up today, I want to get one last quote from you that you would like to leave anyone watching this interview with that is looking at Instagram to connect with their audience. They want to grow their business on Instagram. What's the number one takeaway that you'd want to leave someone with in terms of like inspiration towards them on their journey? And like, what would you like to leave people with?
Yeah, I would say don't take the feedback from the platform personally. It's not a personal attack on you. It doesn't mean, right? Because I've heard this for so many years of someone, I put all this effort into that post and it bombed. No one liked it, right? Well, it's feedback. It's not personal, right? It's data. How can we use that to get better, right? Maybe we need to tweak this messaging. Maybe you need to, right, change the entire approach. Like it is a practice in and of itself. I mean, content creation is a skill. And I think a lot of people don't look at it that way. And just like, you're not going to go buy a tennis racket and be a professional tennis player overnight, right? Same idea with content creation. Like some people, it might come a little bit more easily too and more naturally, and some other people have to work for it. But that doesn't mean you can't be equally as successful. And I would say the things that you maybe would shy away from talking about, that's really what you should be leaning into on social because those controversial takes, right? Those point of view pieces of content, the things that everyone else in your industry is hiding, and you're the one that comes out and talks about it in the way that it, is important or valuable to the customer. Like those sorts of things create this invaluable trust that's going to go a long way for you and your business. And also, it's a long game. Social media, in my opinion, is a long game. You're not here to burn out, blow up overnight. I've had posts get as many as like 17.9 million views, right? And they convert to nothing. And then I've had posts with like 10 really amazing comments that convert into a ton of sales. So, and then I've had people follow me for literally years and go and buy from every like competitor until they finally like, shit, like I know I need to work with you. And they come and they crush it. And then I've had people buy overnight. So like there is no one way, right? It is a little bit it is a process and a journey, and it is a long game. Really looking at that approach when you're thinking about social media is like it's not going anywhere. And the messaging approach that you're going to take with your content, it will apply to every other platform. Like that's the thing that isn't platform specific, right? It's platform agnostic. Like it's going to be omnipresent on omni-channel because the messaging at the end of the day is what's going to resonate with the consumer, and that's what's going to help them look to you as a credible authority, trust you, and buy from you eventually too, right? It's not the vanity stuff. So keep going, you got it. And there's people here to support you. You never have to do it alone.
Thank you, Jenay. And where can people find out and follow along with your journey if they want to learn more about you?
Absolutely. Come and follow me on Instagram at Jenay Rose Official. And just DM me. Let's chat, or my team member, whoever's in there, will chat with you. And we're happy to get you some advice or get you pointed in the right direction, whether that's thinking more about working with someone like us or something totally different. We're here to be a resource and a guide, not a salesperson. So feel free to message me over on Instagram. And yeah, that's all I
Awesome.
got.
Well, thank you so much, Jenay. I'll see you
Absolutely.
soon. Sign off here, everyone. Keep calm, keep calm and AI on out there. We'll see you on the other side.
Bye,
See you,
guys.
Jenay. Cheers, y'all.